Hello there. My name is Paul Smith, and I want to tell you why I support Tulsi Gabbard for president. Now, you may be thinking, Paul Smith, who are you? Why do I even care? That's a very good question. I'm actually just a guy living here in Des Moines, Iowa. I am not an actor. I'm not a paid spokesperson. I'm not affiliated with Tulsi's campaign in any capacity whatsoever, though I will admit I have donated money, about $100 to her campaign, which is something I haven't done for a presidential candidate in a very long time, I might add. I would also add, for your clarification, I used to be a very diehard Republican. I mean, very active, very involved, actually managed local level campaigns, developed websites for a congressional candidate and a governor candidate here in Iowa, and even ran for office myself at one point for state senate. Now, all of that experience let me see behind the curtain, if you will. And it was then that I began my journey towards being more cynical and skeptical and suspicious about a lot of stuff, because I saw how things really work. It may also be a factor that my degree is in journalism, and so that was I understand the value of doing research and looking into things. And so I began to shift a bit more towards the middle. Never was able to go completely to the left side, though, because as I really looked at what not just the party platform stood for, but what the individuals representing each party did and said, I discovered that I could agree with this group on this stuff, and I could agree with this group on this stuff, but I couldn't agree with either group on everything. And so I found myself in this middle ground where I'm now registered independent. And the problem with being in this kind of mindset is when it comes time for electing a president, it makes it really tough to find a candidate you can support. Because I decided long ago, I don't vote against somebody else. I don't choose to vote for you because I don't like that one. I will vote for you if you give me reason to vote for you. If I know I can support you, I will vote for you. But if all you do is tell me, vote for me because I'm not that person, I'm not voting for you either, because I want to know what I'm getting. And that was actually one of the issues I had in the last presidential election. In fact, I was not able to vote for either of the main party candidates. And so I didn't. I voted for the Libertarian candidate. And even then, I didn't agree with everything the Libertarian candidate was proclaiming. Well, likewise, I now am in a situation where I'm thinking, who do I choose? Who do I support in this next presidential election? And along comes Tulsi Gabbard. And Tulsi Gabbard has started to build this reputation for being that middle ground candidate. She is a Democrat, but she's oftentimes labeled as the Democrat Republicans like. Now, that's used as an insult by people who are more grounded more firmly in the Democratic camp and who want a pure Democrat, as they say. And what increasingly that seems to mean is somebody who is as far to the left as you can get, because that seems to be what most of the Democratic candidates are jockeying for, is to establish which of them is farthest to the left of everybody else. Meanwhile, on the Republican side, aside from President Trump, who will undoubtedly be the party's nominee, unless something really strange would happen, still, no matter who is on the ticket on the Republican side, they're going to be carving out to prove that they're more conservative, that they're over that end. And so then you've got someone like Tulsi Gabbard, who is a Democrat, but who does project some concepts that are appealing to conservatives, to Republicans. And that causes Democrats to dismiss her, I'm noticing, which I don't understand, because in my mind, that would make her the best candidate of all of them. Because you don't want a candidate, whichever party, you don't want a candidate who only attracts your party. You need a candidate who can attract people like me, who are in the middle, that are a little bit of both. So I like Tulsi Gabbard for many reasons. I don't support everything she stands for. I don't agree with everything she says. So why do I support her? That's another really good question. You see, no matter what a candidate says out on the stump, we're only hearing just a fraction of 1% of everything that person will have to deal with if they are elected president in this case. What's really important is not what they're saying on the campaign trail, but what you can tell about their character, their personality, their integrity. And I'll tell you, far too many of the candidates running are more interested in running polls to find out what we think so they can repackage that and spit it back to us than they are at just telling us what they will do if they're president. And I can't support somebody who's like that. Tulsi Gabbard, on the other hand, even when she proclaims an idea or a concept that I don't buy into fully, I can tell that she does so from a position of personal passion, from a position of having researched it, having looked into it, and having determined this is the position she's comfortable with. And that I respect. Even if I don't agree, I respect, and I respect that level of integrity. And so, again, I support her. But you don't have to take just my word for it because, again, who am I? I'm just some guy in Iowa. She actually was here a few weeks ago at a big steak fry event. All of the candidates were here and they all spoke, but she was here for that. And then afterwards, she held a little town hall meeting where the people were invited to go to, and I attended that. And it was a long event, a lot of question and answer and stuff, but she began it by presenting some of her own concepts, her own ideas, and I recorded all of that. Now, it's long. It's almost half an hour, and so buckle in, but I encourage you to watch the whole thing because I'm tacking that on here. I think it's important for us to really know who our candidates are, and if you want to know who Tulsi Gabbard is, she's not to be dismissed. You know, some people dismiss her saying she's a long shot, she's a dark horse, she doesn't stand a chance. You know, they said the same thing about an unknown governor from Arkansas when he ran for president. They also said it about a first-term U.S. senator from Illinois that ran for president. Those both were fairly recent stories, and in both cases, those individuals turned out to be the right choices for their party. Now, Tulsi Gabbard is being dismissed as well. I urge you not to just dismiss her. Stop and listen to what she has to say. And if you think, oh, she's just a Republican in Democrat clothing, listen to her comments and what I'm about to show you. I don't think you'll be able to hold to that. That's a cliche that you're hearing. That's a talking point. It's not reality. Listen to what Tulsi herself has to say. And I think once you do, you will agree with me. She is an excellent choice to be the next president of the United States.
So good to see all of you here. How are you tonight? Good day. It's not raining anymore, so that's a good thing. We came from the steak fry just a little bit before this, and there were little off and on showers through most of the day, enough to keep us cool. When I got up to speak, I talked about how these little showers remind me of home in Hawaii. You get the showers, then the sun comes out, and it's considered blessings in Native Hawaiian culture. And then the blessing tap turned on really hard there at the end. And it came pouring down, so that's good. We got a little quick wet clothes change and came straight here. But I'm so glad that you all took the time to come here tonight. It's great to be here in Iowa, always. And there's a lot going on in the world. There's a lot for us to talk about, and I'm looking forward to the conversation that we're going to have. I want to kick it off, though, just starting with really why we're all gathered here. Why we've taken our time off of a Saturday afternoon to come and talk about our future. Because it is our future that's at stake here on so many levels. Really what it comes down to when we look at the heart of the problems that we are seeking to solve is the reality that the vision that Abraham Lincoln laid out for us of a government of, by, and for the people is not the reality that we live with today. Instead, we have a government of, by, and for the very few, the very rich, and the very powerful. And they spent a lot of time getting this power. And all this time, it has been to the detriment of the people. We, the people, have been left behind as a result. I'm running for president because you deserve a president who will put your interests ahead of profits, put your interests ahead of partisan politics, who will put your interests and the interests of our country at the forefront of every single decision that's made. I will bring these values of service above self, these principles of integrity and respect and honor to the presidency, to make sure that our White House is a beacon of light and hope and opportunity for every single American across this country. It is our future that is at stake. And we're gathered here because we understand that the only way that we bring about this government of, by, and for the people is when we, the people, make it happen, right? Right. Making sure that our voices are heard. We, the people. We, the people. You know, these are words that we hear throughout our lives, but for too long, our voices have not been heard. And we see the results of this in so many different examples. Things that we're concerned about in everyday lives, things like healthcare. Now, the more we've had the opportunity to travel across the country, the more heartbreaking stories I hear from people about how our broken healthcare system isn't serving the healthcare needs of our people. How even as we see big health insurance companies and big pharmaceutical companies' profits continue to skyrocket and increase, more and more we are seeing Americans who are struggling just to get the basic care they need, who are struggling just to be able to afford necessary medicines or prescription drugs for themselves, for their children, for their parents, for their loved ones. We see more and more of our seniors who are struggling just to keep a roof over their heads and to be able to afford the medicines they need. Now, our government is the #1 buyer of prescription drugs in the world. The #1 customer in the world. So for any of us, have ever been through an economics 101 class, or you understand the basics of business, you understand your biggest customer, there's some leverage there. If they want to negotiate a lower price, odds are that you're going to be able to work with them to do that because you want to keep your #1 customer, right? This was such a threat to the profits of big pharma that year after year after year, anytime healthcare reform comes up, they get their lobbyists right in there as quickly as they can to make sure that the prohibition for Medicare to negotiate lower drug prices for the American people is kept in law. Because God forbid that our laws and policies would actually serve the people instead of big pharma's profits. And they have succeeded thus far in keeping that status quo that serves them and causes harm to people. How is that possible? Because we have a government of, by, and for the rich and powerful, leaving the people behind. There are very real practical consequences to this. These aren't just empty words we're throwing out. This comes from the very few rich and powerful being able to use that power and that money to levy influence over policymakers who unfortunately are more interested in serving their interests than the interests of the people. The opioid crisis is something that more and more people in our country unfortunately are falling victim to, and is more and more being brought into the center of conversations and in the news. Understand that this is an epidemic that affects all of us. In my home state of Hawaii, it's a pretty small state. We have about 1.3 million people. Yet we have over 500,000 active opioid prescriptions. It's a lot. Almost half of our state. And there are other states that are worse off. Now, if you look at a lot of the corruption charges and the criminal charges that many states are now filing against these prescription drug companies like Purdue Pharma. Purdue Pharma now trying to park their assets in places outside of their company so that they can keep their money, and now most recently filing bankruptcy to once again protect themselves from we the people using our judicial system to serve us. But here's the thing is years ago, the DEA was starting to investigate the practices of big companies like Purdue Pharma and how they're cheating and lying to people and proliferating their drugs that are really ruining people's lives and in some cases taking their lives. Just as the DEA was closing in on this, and there's some documentaries that go into great detail on this, and just as the DEA was closing in, guess what happened in Congress? Congressman, who was in a committee of power, a jurisdiction, was able to pass a law that basically took away the DEA's power to go after Big Pharma. So even as these guys were getting closer and closer in their case, all of a sudden they brought it to their boss. They said, sorry, we got no power. We can't do anything with this. A government of, by, and for the rich and powerful is not a government of, by, and for the people. This is the problem. This is the root cause of all of these challenges that we're facing. And this is the change that we're seeking to bring about. Whereas presidents, I'll fight for a healthcare system that serves every single American, making sure that everyone is able to get the care they need when they need it. We cannot be the wealthiest country in the world, paying far more for healthcare than any other country in the world, with worse outcomes, and more people in our country afraid of that one healthcare emergency that's going to break the bank and potentially put their family out on the street. As president, I'll fight to crack down on big insurance and big pharma, who've been profiting off of and exploiting the sick for far too long, making sure that we change our law so that we can negotiate lower prescription drug prices. We make sure that we're delivering that quality health care for all. As presidents, I'll crack down on big pharmaceutical companies who are behind this opioid epidemic, ending the federal prohibition on marijuana that they are fighting against because they know that in states where marijuana has been legalized or decriminalized, medicinal or recreational, otherwise, there's been a drastic reduction in opioid addiction and opioid-related deaths. We'll crack down on private prisons. We shouldn't have them. A business model that earns more profits for private prisons based on keeping their cells and their beds full, further incentivizing high recidivism rates than actually saying, hey, look, let's look at how we stop being the most incarcerated country in the world. Let's fix this problem by ending the failed war on drugs, by starting to treat substance abuse and addiction as a health care need, actually getting people the help that they need, rather than turning them into criminals. This is one of the ironic things that has been in place since this war on drugs began, right? Because the whole promise was, look, these drugs are very harmful. They're very bad for you. So let's make them illegal, scheduled in this controlled substances list. And if you're caught with them for possession or otherwise, we're going to throw you in prison because they're bad for you. We don't want you to get hurt. We want what's best for you. We don't want you to take these harmful drugs. So if you do, we'll throw you in prison and give you a criminal record for the rest of your life.
If you're a person of color.
Which has disproportionately impacted communities of poverty and communities of color. Ending the failed war on drugs. Dealing with the root cause of these problems. You look at our criminal justice system and how many people go in and out of this criminal justice system through this revolving door because they have mental health needs that are never really addressed, that are never identified, where you have someone who clearly needs help, but maybe they're creating a nuisance. Get arrested for creating a nuisance on the sidewalk or on the streets, but this person really actually just needs help. They don't need to go spend a night in jail. They don't need to be arrested and go to prison. Getting to the root cause of these challenges and recognizing how we can and should provide this help for those who need it, and reserve our criminal justice system for those who actually do need to be in prison for the safety of our society. These are the kinds of changes that we can bring about when we actually are looking at what is in the best interest of the people. Not thinking about profits or partisan politics, just finding solutions. In Congress, a few months ago, we passed a bill called the First Step Act that dealt with some very important prison reforms that were long overdue. prison reforms that since this bill was passed and signed into law with strong bipartisan support, thousands of people who were previously in prison are now back home with their families because that's where they needed to be. Prison reforms that were put in place to help reduce these recidivism rates, that as people are there and they're serving their time for the crime that they committed, we're actually helping them be best set up for success to reintegrate back with their families and communities rather than continue the cycle that we too often see, where someone gets out and there's no opportunity for them to move forward. This bill was not passed easily. The two leads on this bill was a very progressive guy who's from New York, a good friend of mine, Hakeem Jeffries, and a very conservative guy who's a friend of mine who's a Republican from Georgia. Two people who come from very different backgrounds, different parties, completely different political ideologies, but they recognize this is an important thing that we need to do for the American people. They set aside their differences and they led the way. And both of them got criticized by leaders in their respective parties, saying, how dare you work with this guy? How dare you work with that guy? Don't you know how bad he is and how evil he is and how much he hates people? Both sides were saying that. But they put these principles of service above self on this bill and built a strong coalition within Congress, but also outside of Congress, getting partnerships from groups like the ACLU and the Koch brothers. Wow. Exactly. But because of this coalition, this bill was passed into law. You had Jared Kushner working very closely with my friend Van Jones, who was droned out of the White House under the Obama administration by Republicans who accused him of being a communist. Working together to pass legislation that will actually help people. It was called the First Step Act because it's the first step. There's a lot more that we need to do in dealing with sentencing reform, dealing with prosecutor training and reform. There's a lot of work that we need to do, but this is a glimmer of hope. When I'm often asked, like, how can we come together as a country? The divides seem so great. They almost seem too great to heal, too great to build bridges. But this is one example of many that we can point to that show what is possible when we come together as Americans. When we come together motivated by love and care for our country and for our people. That we recognize, even if there's just one thing that we can agree on, there's probably more, but even if there's just one thing we can agree on, yes, as members of Congress, but us as people in this diverse nation, let's start the conversation there on a foundation of respect for each other. Not just talking at each other, but actually listening and having a discussion, having a debate, even having strong debate. Recognize this is not a bad thing. We can agree to disagree without being disagreeable on some things, find those areas of agreement, and move forward. Move forward, because that's really what we're looking to do here. For us to move forward so that every single election cycle, we don't have to keep talking about the same old things because they've never been solved. Because the responses are always a reaction to the superficial problem. Never actually solving it, just putting a Band-Aid on it until the next thing pops up in the news or on Twitter. Not actually getting to the root cause of the problem. So there's a lot of change that we need to make. We've got to address the threats we're facing to our environment, our climate. Going to the back of the room. Protection of our environment. This was something that for me, growing up in Hawaii, was not something that I had to be taught. I'm grateful for that. I grew up, when I first learned how to swim, it was in the shallow end of the ocean. With sand everywhere. But I grew up with a culture of respect and understanding of responsibility that we have as people to protect our home, to protect our water, protect our air, protect these beautiful places that we thankfully get to enjoy, that are our playgrounds, the places that we spend with our families. And this is something that motivated me. I got involved As a teenager at a nonprofit, we went and created a program. We took the elementary school kids all across Hawaii. I wrote a little skit for this program called The Adventures of Water Woman. I was, I think, 16 or 17 at the time. And I was Water Woman. I know. But there is a video, there's proof. I had the blue cape and all, but the cool thing was, I was super, super shy as a kid growing up. Total introvert, but I really was passionate about this. I was passionate about protecting our planet. We took this program to like second, third, and fourth graders all across the state. And like, I'd never given a speech, I'd never talked in front of people, but when I came out as Water Woman with my nemesis, Oily Al, he was all scruffy, oily looking dude, and we went through a day in life of Oily Al. And every time he was about to do something like, change the oil in his car, and he was going to pour it down the storm drain, Water Woman would come in the nick of time and stop him and save the day and tell him, like, here's why that's a bad idea. And the best thing was seeing the look on these kids' eyes as they're sitting there, their legs crossed on the floor watching this, seeing things that they could relate to, their everyday lives. Oily Al died dumping a bunch of pesticides on his garden, all these different things, throwing his soda can out the car window as he's driving by, things that they could relate to, and seeing that light bulb go off in their eyes and saying, wow, hey, I can tell mom and dad, I can tell auntie and uncle, don't do that. That's a bad thing. And starting to bring about this change in our kids, to make these better choices in our lifestyle, and understand there's consequences to the decisions that we make. So for me, this issue is one that started from when I was very young and has continued throughout my time both serving in the State House, the City Council, and now in Congress. As President, I will lead the charge in ending our dependence on fossil fuels and making this quick and urgent transition towards clean, renewable energy. Ending the subsidies to the tune of almost $30 billion every year that we are giving to big oil, and redirecting our taxpayer dollars instead towards those investments in infrastructure and clean, renewable energy, ushering in a new green century for us, for all of us. It has to do with sustainable infrastructure. It has to do with good paying jobs and a trained workforce to work in this industry. This is something that not only makes sense for our environment, but it makes sense economically. The cost of clean energy is now dropping lower than fossil fuels. So even if you're not buying into why we need to protect our environment, think about your pocketbook. We'll save some money in the process. This alone is not enough. We've got to look at agriculture and how so much of the big multinational agriculture corporations and their way of farming has continued to emit more carbon into our environment. We need to provide the incentives to be able to help transition off of this old way of farming and towards sustainable regenerative agriculture that can do so much to help keep our water clean and that can capture so much of this carbon that's already in the environment. There's so much information out there about how we can continue to support our farmers and our family farms and those who are growing food for people to eat, but making sure we're doing it in a sustainable way that actually protects our farm, protects our soil quality, and makes sure that we can continue farming these lands for generations to come. Even if we do all of these things now, it still won't be enough to address the global challenge that we're facing, which is why it's so important. Once again, I think many of you have heard me say foreign policy is central to every other issue that we face. I will lead with a foreign policy that's based on cooperation rather than conflict. Working with other countries. Yes, we have our differences with some. We've got to be able to work out those differences using diplomacy while leaving the doors open to be able to work together with them on areas of shared interest, like climate change. China is a lot in the news these days. Trump is waging this very erratic, emotional shoot from the hip trade and tariff war with China. It's taking an economic toll on our farmers, small business owners, manufacturers here, the uncertainty and the destabilizing effect it's having on our economy here, and waging this economic war with a nuclear armed country, a very dangerous thing. But also the way that he's doing this is not only hurting us here, it's closed off any possibility to be able to work with China on things like climate change, something that's necessary for us to be able to address the global challenge that we face. It has to be done through a global coalition. So yes, I will re-enter the Paris Accords, but you know as well as I do, that doesn't even come close to where we need to be on this planet to protect our planet for you and all of those who will come after you. And there's a whole host of other issues that I know we want to discuss tonight, things like immigration reform, gun safety legislation, the need to invest in education and make sure that we're giving our teachers what they need to best take care of our kids, need to invest in infrastructure, the need to continue to fight for and support our working men and women and unions in this country. But I want to be able to save some of that for our discussion and point to the issue that is central to our ability to be able to invest in serving the needs of our people. And that issue is the cost of war. What does that mean? The cost of war. Brian mentioned in his introduction, I continue to serve in the Army National Guard. I'm currently a major and have served now for over 16 years. Deployed twice to the Middle East where I saw firsthand the high and very terrible human cost of war. I served in 2005, all of 2005 in Iraq in a field medical unit where every single day we were confronted with those who paid the price. Friends of ours who never came home. Whose families got to welcome them home in a coffin. We saw the heavy toll that it took on the people in Iraq. Coming back here at home, where too often the cost of war is symbolized by a name that you'll see on the headlines when yet another one of our men and women in uniform is killed in combat. Cost of war extends far beyond that. Where every single time that you're told that there's just not enough money to pay for health care for all, that there's just not enough money to make sure there's clean water for our people to drink or bathe in. There's just not enough money to upgrade and improve our infrastructure to make sure it's safe for people. There's not enough money to invest in our children, in their classrooms, in their education. There's just not enough money. But as every time you are told this by politicians, they are very often the same politicians who don't think twice about continuing to wage these wasteful, counterproductive wars, spending trillions of our taxpayer dollars in doing so. This cost of war is paid for by every one of us. Every single one of us. As president, I will end these wasteful wars. That we don't start any new ones. I will work to end this new Cold War and arms race that we are in. Ever-escalating tensions between the United States and China and Russia, nuclear-armed countries, an arms race that's continuing to take more money out of our pockets and out of our communities to pay for building these weapons that are making us and the world less safe. I will redirect those resources towards nation building right here at home, towards serving the needs of our people, towards rebuilding our future. We've got to get our priorities straight. I'm going to close on this because it's something that's happening right here, right now. What we're talking about with the cost of war is not just something that happened before. This wasn't something that was just about George Bush's war. This is something that's continuing. It has continued through both political parties, and it's happening right now as we speak. Yesterday, President Trump, through his Secretary of Defense, announced that he was sending more U.S. troops to where? Saudi Arabia. To protect Americans? No. To protect Saudi Arabia, Saudi Arabia's oil, and Saudi Arabia's infrastructure. Further escalating, what we're already seeing is this mutual cycle of retaliation. And this thing that happened there in Saudi Arabia, it didn't just happen out of nowhere. If you watch news, they'll say, oh my gosh, Iran provoked, continuing to provoke increasing these tensions, this act of provocation. But what happened before that? And I don't look, Iran, I don't justify what they do or anything that they've done. But let's just look at this clear-eyed. This is happening because our sanctions and global sanctions and Trump's tearing up of the Iran nuclear deal and implementing more and more crippling sanctions have stopped Iran from being able to sell any of their oil on the market. Hurting their economy, hurting their people. I mean, did you really think there was going to be no consequence to that? And so now Trump is deploying our troops to serve Saudi Arabia and Saudi Arabia's interests. The very same country that supports Al-Qaeda today in countries like Yemen and Syria. The very same country that continues to spend billions of dollars every year spreading this extremist Wahhabi ideology around the world that fuels terrorist organizations like ISIS and Al-Qaeda. This is a total betrayal. So the next question is, okay, Tulsi, what would you do? Here's exactly what I would do if I were president today. I would end our alliance with Saudi Arabia. I would re-exit the Iran nuclear agreement, end these crippling sanctions, understanding that every single day that goes by, that this doesn't happen, that this agreement remains in the trash can, is another day that Iran is closer to developing a nuclear weapon. There are very real stakes. The most important responsibility the president has is to serve you as your commander-in-chief. Our objective must be to keep the American people safe, to ensure our national security. The decisions that this president is making is undermining our national security, and he is dishonoring my brothers and sisters in uniform by sending them on missions that do not serve the interests of the American people, that are serving the interests of a foreign power, essentially giving up our sovereignty to Saudi Arabia, all while taking action that is unconstitutional. And when pressed on how can they take this action without congressional approval, they say, well, the president has Article 2 powers, that our national security is at peril. But I have yet to see what the explanation is. The fact is, the actions they're taking are further placing us at peril. They're further weakening and undermining our national security. Bringing the experience that I have, I am prepared to walk in on day one of the Oval Office and serve you as Commander-in-Chief, making sure that the decisions that we make in this country actually further strengthen our security and serve the interests of the American people. That we end these wasteful wars, that we de-escalate these tensions with other countries, that we stop being the world's police and engage with other countries in the world with respect, with cooperation, rather than conflict. Actually being the force for good that we, the American people in the United States, can and should be in the world. And you know we cannot do this alone. The powers that be are powerful. The obstacles are great, but there is no greater power than when we, the American people, exercise our voices and take that power within our own hands to bring about this change within our own government, so that it truly is a government that serves our interests. We have a lot of work to do ahead of us. People power is strong, and I'm proud of the People Powered campaign that we have. But I want to invite every single one of you here to join us. I'll have somebody come up here and talk a little bit later on exactly how best you can do that, but I need every single one of you. We cannot underestimate the consequences of continuing the status quo. We can't wait any longer. With that, I'll open it up. Questions, comments, thoughts? Thank you so much.